Welcome in, Minnesota sports fans, to another edition of Timberwolves on SI right here on the Bring Me the Sports YouTube channel. Jonathan Harrison here, joined by Nolan O'Hara and Will Ragatz for a little Wolves conversation after the first 2 or so weeks of the season to get going, boys. It's been an exciting season, up and down for the Wolves. Before we jump into it, make sure we want to remind you, the watcher, to hit subscribe. It does help us get found. Also helps you get notified every time we post a new video here on the channel, which we try to do daily. Doesn't always happen, but we try to get you a new Minnesota sports topic every day to talk about. And let's jump right into this. 4-3 start. What do you guys, just generally, what do you guys make of the start to the season? Obviously, a lot of off-season changes were the topic of discussion for the most part, but now we've seen this team. We're starting to see some things develop on it. What are your thoughts, Nolan? I'll start with you.
Yeah, I think in general it's kind of relatively what you'd expect, right? They're 4-3, 7 games in. They played tonight in Chicago. A little up and down. They've had some struggles. You can tell it's not quite all clicking, which I think was to be expected when you make a huge trade like they did right before training camp and really didn't get much of a preseason together. I think the best would still be to come at this point. I think you can kind of see what it'll probably look like. I think they can take probably a pretty significant jump offensively from where they were last year, and they're probably not going to be as good defensively. I think that's kind of the general sense you can get, but I think there's still a lot of things to work out. Offensively, it's Randall's play so much different than Cat did, where there's still some kinks that they haven't quite worked out. The starting rotation, the starting lineup in particular, has had its fair share of struggles. I think, but I think overall you can kind of see where it's going. But I think it's still going to take some time, probably another 20 or so games before they really figure out how to all click together. And especially, that starting lineup and then some of the defensive things with when you don't have two 7-footers out there, it's a little bit of a harder to defend. But I think they will get more comfortable kind of as the season goes on. But I think this is probably what you'd expect for another 20 or so games.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think it's you kind of anticipated coming into the season with such a big trade that really changes the whole roster construction so close to the start of the season that it wasn't going to be smooth right away. There was a lot for Chris Finch to work out, and these players have to gel together. And I agree. I think could take another few months, but everything they've got to be doing is just trying to build and learn and figure out what works on both sides of the floor so that this team, when the playoffs come around, will be ready to kind of be rolling at peak efficiency. But for the most part, I've been encouraged. The starting lineup looks a little clunky at times, especially on the offensive end. Jaden McDaniels, it's not been a great, first 2 weeks for him. A lot of season, obviously, still to play. But, Anthony Edwards is doing Anthony Edwards things. He's launching a ton of threes. He's hitting a ton of threes. Has been playing a little bit better with the, not over dribbling the ball, moving within the flow of the offense. There's been some good 2-man stuff with him and Randall. But I think the most encouraging thing is the Wolves have 3 players coming off their bench who would probably be starting on 90% of the teams in the league. Nickeil Alexander-Walker has been incredible. Dante DiVincenzo, who I really was excited about when they made that trade, has just lived up to expectations in that regard. He's a great shooter. He's a great he's exactly who maybe Ant will never be, but could aspire to be in terms of moving the offense, making plays, moving without the ball, just being a perfect fit, really in any offense, but in what Chris Finch wants to do. And then Naz Reid, 2 words is Naz Reid. The dude's awesome. So that element of it, they have 8 starting caliber players. It was nice to see. I was at the Hornets game on Monday night. They were able to get Rob Dillingham, Josh Minott, those kind of guys, a little bit of action at the end of a blowout. But the 8-man rotation, if they can figure it out, the spacing and the schemes and what works, I think they have as high of a ceiling as maybe any team in the league with just the roster versatility, the lineup combos they can put together, and then just the two-way potential 1 through 8 of this roster.
Yeah, so there's a lot certainly there that you guys have mentioned that I want to break down or kind of key in on. But I want to start off with where you ended off there, Will, is that the bench seems to be clicking. Or Nolan, you wrote about this yesterday over on Timberwolves on SI. So the bench is clearly playing a little bit better than the starters in their moments. So what's the key to that? Why are the bench players performing a little bit better, and how does that kind of bode for the rest of the season?
Yeah, I think right now, I think it is kind of as simple as that. It's Randall's style is so much different than Cat's was that I think that starting group in particular, it's just taking some time to get used to. Like Will was saying, I think you see some of the potential with like the two-man combinations with like Ant and Randall. Ant even said the other night, like he's like, I told him just do his thing and I'll catch and shoot. And I think Finch said the other night he like gives that group a B plus. Ant and Randall together so far for their start. Um, because like, you can see it, and you definitely take some of the pressure off there. But with Rudy, obviously, Cat could pop out a lot more than Randall would, and didn't drive as much. So some of the spacing there is a little awkward, and then some of it's just been as simple as like weird turnovers and missing shots, right? Like Jaden's kind of struggled shooting so far this year. Mike seems to be figuring it out, but has been dealing with the wrist thing, and it was taking him a little while to kind of get back from that. And so some of it is just as simple as like they've missed some open shots. Where I think the bench unit, Nikhil Alexander Walker has been great on both ends of the floor. When Rudy is not on the floor with Randall, it seems like he's a little more comfortable on the offense, where he can just kind of sit and park in the paint. Um, Dante's been great ball movement wise, and has been able to, even he struggled shooting a little bit at the beginning of the year, but seems to be clicking now. And that unit that started the second and fourth quarters of the Hornets game with Nikhil, Nas, Dante, Mike, and Rudy. I mean, that lineup was just kind of firing on all cylinders. A lot of playmakers. They were moving the ball really well. They started the second quarter on like a 13-2 run and really pulled away. So I think some of those lineups are just moving, I think, a little more naturally because you don't have like one guy where like Randall's going to have the ball a lot, Ant's going to have the ball a lot. Those guys can kind of just move the ball around. So I think that helps a little bit offensively. And some of those guys off the bench, like Nikhil in particular, has been their best defensive player so far this year. He's been just really great on both ends of the floor. So I think those have just been a little more natural, where it takes a little bit more time to kind of figure out that starting group. But I think it comes along there, but it'll just take a little bit more time.
Yeah, I mean, I think Randall's been pretty good so far. He had that weird kind of clunker in his Wolves debut against the Lakers, but since then, I mean, he's putting up over 20 a night. He's rebounding, he's playmaking, getting some assists. I just think the overall fit and the spacing and the team kind of learning to play with Randall, it's been a little bit, I mean, clunky. I think is a good word when the starting lineup's been out there because the Randall Rudy fit, and then McDaniels. I mean, Jaden's really been kind of one of the interesting storylines so far. Just his struggles to shoot the ball. We were hoping, I think, for more of an offensive leap this year, and it could still happen. But and then Mike Conley as well hasn't really looked the same as he has the last couple of years when he's been such a huge piece of what the Wolves have done. He's been such a reliable outside shooter. I don't know if his wrist is affecting him in any way or not, but like individually, I mean, obviously you want Anthony Edwards out there all the time. He's been great so far. I think Randall's been good. It's just when only one is out there, or even sometimes neither, there's just not going to be as much ISO play. There's not going to be as much ball stopping. And sometimes you need ISO play. You need one of your two best players to go get a bucket, or two best offensive players at least, to go get a bucket. And there's value in that. But when you watch the lineups with DiVincenzo and Nas in there, the ball is just snapping around and moving. And I think Chris Finch really likes that style of play. When they're getting up and down the floor in transition, they're moving without the ball. They're really selfless. It's just been really fun, in particular, to watch those three guys play. DiVincenzo, I think, just over the course of the year, is going to be such a huge piece for the Wolves. And Nikhil, too. He was kind of a forgotten guy, I think, when DiVincenzo came over in the trade from the Knicks. But he has really just risen his game to where it's been at times the last season and the season before. And It's been a pleasure to watch both of those guys, and that's just a huge thing for this team is they have so many different guys they can throw out there, different lineup constructions that Chris Finch can go to. And it wouldn't be surprising to me. It's not going to happen for a while, certainly, but if at some point one or maybe two of those guys ends up in that starting lineup, whether that's I don't know who you're taking out. Maybe Mike Conley, maybe Jaden, maybe Julius. Probably not Julius. So we'll see moving forward. But really, a luxury, as Chris Finch said after the Hornets game, to have 8 starters basically.
There's been a lot of talk from you guys on Julius Randle and that fit, and that was obviously the main point of conversation when we did our Wolves preview a couple weeks ago, is how this would fit in. So 2 weeks in, 7 games in, 4-3 start. How has he kind of fit into this offense, and how has this offense changed around him? What's the biggest change you guys have noticed from him being in that lineup instead of Karl Anthony Towns, what we saw the past couple seasons? And how has he fit in and played alongside Rudy Gobert so far this season?
Yeah, I think one of the main things you're seeing with it is the offense is running through him a lot more. He's a lot drives a lot. He'll get the ball in the post and he'll pass, and he's a really good passer too. And he's opened a lot of open shots. Just his presence, physicality in the paint, they have to collapse around him, and that's why you're seeing Ant shooting as many threes as he is. You're seeing some of these other shots, like we talked about, some of the shots not falling too. But they've really had good looks. I think that's part of the issue with some of the shots not falling is you've had a lot of really good looks. But I think it's just there have been some things that have been a little clunky. The starting unit struggled with turnovers. Some of them just bad, silly mistake kind of turnovers. I think at times you can kind of see some of the spacing where it's just not quite what you'd want. With him and Rudy in the paint is kind of a tough duo, but I think overall you can see where it should be able to work out because it Julius is drawing a lot of attention, really is opening things up for Ant. Ant hasn't had to go downhill anywhere near as much as he was last year. And once I think you see guys like Jaden and Mike knocking down some of these shots that are not falling right now, I think that will be a really effective unit offensively, that starting lineup. I think it's just they're still getting adjusted to some of the spacing things. And I think once they kind of get all on the same page with each other and don't have some of these turnover problems, that it will come together. But I'd say overall it's been a fairly decent fit so far, at least kind of as far as what you can see where it's going to go. But there's definitely issues that haven't been all ironed out yet. But it'll get there. I think it'll get there. I think I'd be pretty optimistic that this will be a very effective unit offensively by the end of the year.
Yeah, I don't think that the starting five for the Wolves is going to end up with. I think they've got like a -9 net rating right now. They're too good offensively, particularly on defense. They should be a lot better than they have been. When you have Jaden McDaniels and Rudy Gobert out there, and Ant and Randall's not a slouch defensively either. I just think the reason why I could see them going away from that starting lineup eventually, and just trying to maybe mix up the lineups a little bit more is I just don't know if Jaden and Julius are ever going to be the kind of efficient shooters that you ideally want to surround Ant with. And Randall is a very good offensive player. He's made some threes so far this season for sure. I like that he's kind of a bully on the interior in ways that Cat sometimes wasn't. And Cat's having a great recent stretch for the Knicks, and I think that's a great fit for him. But Randall, he seems to be a little bit more of a willing kind of shot taker and shot creator than Cat. I do think there's a lot of potential with the Ant Randall duo. I just think when you have Jaden out there, I mean, I think he had one season where he shot the ball well from three, but generally, this is not like a stat based thing. I just don't have any confidence right now when Jaden shoots a three that it's going to go in. Like I'm watching the first half on Monday against the Hornets, and every time he shot it, it just doesn't look like it's going in. I don't know if it's his form or if I'm just being unfair in that regard right now, but he hasn't been really making them. Randall, I think, is career 32, 33%. So I just think the more you can mix up the Randall McDaniel,
I was gonna say, wow.
That's a Vikings shot right there. No, the Jaden and Randall and Rudy. Like when you have all three of those guys on the floor, that's three below league average shooters. One complete non-shooter, obviously, in Rudy. So I don't know. I could see maybe Dante or maybe Nah, or maybe even Nas. One of those three guys maybe eventually moving into the starting lineup just to give that unit a little bit more balance and with shooting and with spacing. But we'll see what Chris Finch decides to do. I generally think that the Julius Randle fit has been solid so far. I'm excited to see how he continues to kind of progress with this team and this offense. And they're 4-3 so far, and it's been like we said, a little up and down. But Lakers, Mavs, Spurs are the three losses. They were in all those games. They were all winnable with some better shooting, maybe fewer turnovers. And the
Spurs is a
schedule,
schedule loss too.
yes, the Spurs was a tough back to back after a late home game the night before. But the schedule, what started with the Hornets the other day and will continue with the Bulls tonight. Really opens up. I think they got 3 games against the Blazers in like the span of a week or
And
something.
it's
So
3-4 against the Blazers, which is just weird scheduling.
yeah, so they should be able to start stacking some wins here if they continue to kind of lock in on both ends like they were able to do against Charlotte the other night.
So you guys have mentioned a couple times now that you can see where this offense is going, and you can see that some potential in there. Is there enough with that you guys have seen so far with Randall in this offense and potential pieces moving in and out that this offense can be better than what they had last year, Nolan?
Yeah, I would say the chances are that the offense will be better than last year. Just for the sake of, I think they're gonna have they have more shooters with Dante just on the roster, and they're going to have a lot more looks with Julius being such a, ball dominant player who really does attract a lot of attention in the paint. You're seeing it now. I mean, Ant's shooting way more threes than he has in his career. And he's been shooting the ball great. I don't think you're going to see Jaden shooting this poorly all year. I don't think Mike certainly is not going to be shooting this poorly all year. Um, and then, Dante kind of got off to a little bit of a rough shooting start and has come along. So you've already seen that start to improve. Nikhil's been shooting pretty well. Nas is shooting well. So with the shooters you have around now and the way Julius draws so much attention in the paint and his ability to pass. He is a really good passer, which probably I wasn't as aware of when I only saw him and whenever I watched the Knicks. But he's a really great passer and really does find those guys. So I think that you really do have a pretty high ceiling for this offense when everything does all come together. But I do think I would venture to guess it's probably a top 10 offense this year. And I think they were finished 17th last year. So I don't really see any way that they are going to be on par with what they were last year. Certainly not worse. I think they probably will be a top 10 offense. And depending on how long it takes for everything to click, they could be even higher. I mean, I think the sky is the limit for it. It just is going to depend on when it all starts to click.
Yeah, well, I'll say if Anthony Edwards hits 45% of his threes on like 11 and a half attempts per game all year, they're going to be a really good offense. I don't think that's going to happen. Obviously, that's he's due for a little bit of regression there. But the shot to me he looks really confident. It looks like he put work on it this offseason. Like I think that's a real thing. And the fact that he's taking so many of these threes early on, like teams are going to have to figure out how they defend him in ball screens and DHOs and things like that. And if they start coming up on him, he obviously has such a quick first step to be able to get around him and start getting to the rim a little bit more. I agree with Nolan. I think this is going to be a really good offense. I just think, they've started to find a little bit more of the lobs to Rudy that were missing the last couple of years. It seemed like Mike Conley and maybe Kyle Anderson at times, and maybe Cat at times, were the only guys who would ever throw those, and now you've got Ant throwing them. Dante loves to throw them. You'll see Randall doing it periodically. Mike's still there. They've been able to utilize that, which has been good. And then it's just the volume of shooters that they have. If they can get more out of McDaniels and more out of Conley, that only raises the ceiling even higher. But I just think Dante DiVincenzo is such an awesome offensive player. He's a good defensive player too, but a great fit for what Chris Finch wants to do with keeping things moving on offense and making good decisions. And him and Alexander Walker, Naz Reid, like they've just been really really good, and I think it really raises the floor and the ceiling of this offense to where they could be a top five offense when they start to figure everything out, and they cut down on the turnovers a little bit, and just keep making shots from outside, which they're really embracing the 3-point revolution, just kind of up and down the roster outside of Gobert. But I think the question is, like, are they going to take a step back on defense? They had figured out this system with Cat and Rudy to where they were the best defense in the league. I think they might take a little bit of a step back because just they have a lot to figure out without Cat. I don't know if he gets enough credit sometimes for his role on that side of the ball, and especially like you think of the Nuggets series, he's guarding Jokic, so Gobert can roam and help off Aaron Gordon and things like that. But I mean, the pieces they have with Gobert, with Ant, with McDaniels, I mean Dante, like they should still be a top 10 defense too, which is why I think the ceiling of this team is really really high because of what they should be able to do on both ends of the floor when they get a little more time on task together.
Yeah, that was going to be the next question I had for you guys. Is this defense? We know that last season that was really the main sticking point, the main talking point with these Wolves is how good and how suffocating that defense was. They've obviously stepped back a little bit. What are expectations for this defense, and can it be a top 10 defense, top 5 defense again, or with the changing of pieces, is that going to be kind of out the window and probably just expecting more towards top 10, maybe top 15?
Yeah, I think it certainly can be a top 10 defensive unit again. I think it's gonna take some time to get early returns here, but it does seem like it won't be on the level it was last year, and it is tough when you don't with the 2 7-footers. That really is quite an advantage, especially on the glass. And you've seen this year they've been giving up a lot more offensive rebounds. Guards have been kind of struggling to rebound the ball. Which could be just as much as they never had to when they had 2 7-footers last year. But I know Finch has said that he wants his guards to be doing better in box outs, crashing the glass, not letting up these offensive rebounds. So I think that might be an issue that plagues them because they're fair. If when Gobert's off the court, they're pretty small. It doesn't matter too much against a team like the Hornets when they're pretty small too. But even Taj Gibson, well past his prime, right out of the gates in the beginning of the game, he was grabbing 2, 3 offensive rebounds, getting putbacks. So that's been kind of an
You
issue
should have
for them
seen my
so far this year.
reaction from the upper deck when I saw Taj Gibson. First of all, I didn't even know he was on the Hornets, and I
Right, that
follow
was
I follow the league pretty closely. I had no idea he was on the Hornets. When I thought he was starting, that was a quite exciting moment for me. Sorry
that
to
was that was
interrupt.
kind of no, you're good. That was kind of the reaction, even like sitting in the media section. Like everybody's like, "Wait, Taj Gibson starting for the Hornets?
He hit a
New
corner
season,
three,
yeah."
stretch five.
But they've given up some of those. You can't let Taj Gibson crash the offensive glass. So I think some of those things they are fixable, right? Like they can get the guards to rebound better. They can work on those box outs and everything. But so far, it's been a little bit of a problem. They are not going to be as great on the glass as they were when they had 2 7-footers. They're not going to have the Jokic stopper, which Cat has kind of been the last couple of years. As much as he got kind of dogged for his defense earlier in his career, he really became a much better defensive player than I think people really gave him credit for. And so I think that is going to be a loss. And it's just not quite the same. But I do think they can certainly improve on where they're at now. And there are a lot of things that they do want to see. And in the Hornets game, you did see it. Like after that early stretch there, they did get it together, and they kind of had played with that intensity that they did last year. And that has been one of the things too that Finch has been a little bit frustrated with earlier in the year, is that he just hasn't felt the intensities there on the defensive end. And that's something you can easily get back, right? So I think with that, if they play like they did, towards the end of that Hornets game, how they did at the end of the Nuggets game, that is a team that can be a very good defensive team still. I just don't think that they're necessarily going to be the top defense in the league again this year.
Yeah, the Hornets' defensive performance was encouraging, although I wasn't sure how much of that was them playing well and how much was the Hornets just not being very good. Shout out to, I think, Salone, the sixth overall pick. That man was just chucking up bricks. But I just looked up the stats. The Wolves are 12th right now in both offensive and defensive rating. Um, I think they will finish in the top 10 in both of those categories, but I think the offense will be higher than the defense. If I had to guess, I have more faith in the offensive rating rising up than I do in the defense to some degree. I mean, it's close. I think the fact that, I mean, small sample size, but they're 12th in both right now. I just think the offensive pieces, um, they seem to fit really well. You know, Anthony Edwards at the head of it all, Randall. I think that'll climb. Chris Finch has always been a great offensive coach. I think the defensive rating will climb too, but it's just going to be that it might take even longer on that end of the floor without Cat to adjust. But I mean, again, you got a four-time Defensive Player of the Year as the anchor. You've got a second-team All-Defense player in Jaden McDaniels, who's just a great perimeter stopper. Anthony Edwards, when he locks in, is as good as anybody as with on-ball defense. Nikhil too. So it's an exciting team on both ends of the floor. And I do think the defense will get there with a little more, like Nolan said, a little more consistent game to game effort, a little more defensive rebounding, which oftentimes is a lot about effort. Yeah, they're going to be really good on both sides.
And lastly, before we head out of here and close out the video, I do want to talk about something that Will, you talked about a little bit ago. Anthony Edwards, his 3-point shooting has kind of erupted this season. Looking at the stats, 11.4 attempts per game, which is a jump from last season when he had 6.7. His shooting percentage from 3-point range, 450, up from 357 last season. So clearly in the offseason, he worked on that 3-point shooting. What's behind this change for him in significantly upping his 3-point attempts and shots and accuracy from that range? And how does that fit into this offense? And how does that change his game, Nolan?
Yeah, well, his one thing that goes into it, Finch has said quite a few times that he just seems like he's a lot more confident with it. It's something he did spend some time this summer working on. And they had been trying to get him to shoot more catch and shoot threes over the last couple seasons, but I think this year playing with Julius really does add that element for him where he just doesn't have to have the ball as much, and that collapse on Julius really just creates more looks for him. It could be that he spent a lot of time with Steph Curry this summer, and Steph Curry's just rubbing off on him. But he's shooting really well. I mean, even in the preseason, there was that one game where he had 30 something in the preseason. I just remember watching his shot being like, he really looks like he's developed as a 3-point shooter. So I think as far as his game goes, he hasn't really had to play downhill nearly as much this season. I think that will be something we'll still see when there's some close games and he feels the need to make a play or things of that nature. You know, when it gets to playoff time, if teams start defending him differently and try to take away some of that catch and shoot ability. But I think the way it looks right now is also too, I think part of it is that the easiest way to kind of get the offense comfortable in this early stage is to have it run through Randall and then kind of assimilate around him. So I think that's one of the things that Ant has done really well, and has been making good decisions and shooting the ball and getting a lot of good looks. So I think you might see him get downhill a little more than he has been so far, but I think we'll probably be seeing him shoot a lot more threes throughout this whole year than we have the rest of his career. But it just kind of comes down to that confidence is something he's worked on a lot over the summer.
Yeah, I think there's a balance to be found for sure where I don't think he's going to be shooting 11, 12 threes a game all season long, but I do think he's going to end up well above that, whatever, 6.5 threes per game that he was at last year. And he shot more, I think, in 2020, 21, or no, it was 21, 22, when the Wolves, I think, led the league in threes made. But yeah, there's a balance where it's a real weapon for him. He's always been able to do those really saucy, step back threes off the dribble. He comes off a ball screen, and if you go in to drop it all, he's going to let it fly. So that's going to be there. But like Nolan said, I think a big adjustment is something we've talked about a little bit before is the catch and shoot game, where when he's playing off ball with whether it's Randall or DiVincenzo or the Wolves have a lot of willing passers on their team. The more you can get him into some open looks, catch and shoot, where it doesn't have to be a double tween step back from top of the key. Like those looks can really add to his overall 3-point volume. I don't think Ant's ever going to be Steph Curry or even Dante DiVincenzo in terms of his off-ball movement, which has been something that I've kind of wanted to see more from him over the years, where sometimes if he gets off the ball and he just kind of stands at the wing and doesn't cut or do anything like that. But they're trying to get him to do more of that. And yeah, it makes him such a dangerous player when he's able to shoot a high volume and hit a high volume of threes and then mix in as well. I mean, he's still got the mid-range bag if he wants to go to that. He can still get downhill and finish and yell "a ref" as well as about anybody in the league. So I do need him to hit more than 64% of his free throws, which he's at right now. But I think that'll get cleaned up over time.
All right, final question this time, promise. After what you've seen through the first 7 games, where do you expect this team to finish now in the Western Conference? I know it's still very early, but how have what you've seen through the first 7 games changed kind of your preseason opinions?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember what I said in the preseason. I think I picked them to finish third. I think I'd probably stick with that prediction, third in the West, something like that. I think it will just take some time here still, and I think they're still sorting it out. Like we see a 4-3 start, it might be hovering just a little bit above 500 for a while. I think they'll pick it up as the year goes on, but I'm confident this is a playoff team. I'm confident this could be a very good playoff team too, once they figure it all out. But I think it will take more time still. So I think once they kind of sort out all the chemistry, all the clunkiness that we've kind of seen from the starting unit, that it will be a very good team. So I still say probably a higher seed, third, fourth seed in the West, definitely a playoff team, and the sky's the limit. It just depends on when everything clicks and how well it clicks when it does.
Yeah, I think they'll be somewhere between the 2nd seed and the 5th seed. I think they're way too good to be a play-in team. But also, it looks like Oklahoma City is just going to win 60 games or something this year, and that is, if they stay healthy, I mean, that is a team built to just be really, really good, especially in the regular season. We'll see in the playoffs, but I think they're going to be the 1 seed. The Suns and the Warriors are tied with the Thunder right now at 7-1. I don't know how real those are, particularly with Golden State. Kyle Anderson's making threes now, which is wild, but we'll see. I think the Wolves end up somewhere, probably 3rd or 4th feels like kind of a safe bet, just because they might not really take off until they figure out some more of the chemistry stuff, which could take some time, as we've said. But yeah, they're going to be a playoff team. They're not going to be in the play-in. They should start to win a lot of games, and I think that could happen soon with the schedule. And then once they really get clicking, they're going to be tough to beat. So I don't know if they can get all the way up to the 1 or maybe 2 seed, but they'll be right in the mix.
The Portland games, in theory, should give them some cushion.
It should, for sure. They gotta take advantage of this next week or so on the schedule.
3 games against the same opponent in four overall games. Just a weird scheduling quirk that I don't think
Some
I've
of
seen
it's
very
like the NBA in-season tournament stuff, so I think that might have had something to do with it.
Yeah,
So they just
probably.
kept him there. Yeah.
Yeah, looking forward to it. Guys, appreciate you guys stopping by the channel. Go read their work over on Vikings, Twins, Timberwolves, Gophers, and Badgers on SI, covering it all for you. Make sure to hit the subscribe button. It does help us get found. Helps you get notified every time we post a new video here on the channel. You'll come back tomorrow. We'll talk 5 key matchups for Vikings, Jaguars, and I don't imagine many of those will be Jaguars friendly for that one. Looking forward to that. We'll talk to you, Minnesota sports fans, right back here tomorrow.